The declaration arrived late yesterday evening, not accompanied by the spectacle of a political gathering, but with the sharp, calculated exactness of a tactical command that will reshape the globe's landscape for half a century ahead. For numerous weeks, the news cycles have been blaring about a commercial conflict, about the looming breakdown of Atlantic partnerships, and the danger of devastating duties that the United States was ready to impose on European products. The globe was monitoring the financial markets, concerned about the cost of German automobiles and French beverages. But while the press was occupied by the clamor of fiscal warnings, a far subtler, far more crucial maneuver was unfolding behind private chambers in Brussels and Washington. The information that has just emerged, the arrangement between President Donald Trump and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte on the new Arctic structure, is not merely a diplomatic triumph or a commercial pact. It is a foundational transformation in how the West plans to wage the next worldwide confrontation. Not with troops on a muddy battlefield, but with ice vessels, defense shields, and the essential resources that fuel the technological era. We are observing the instance where the United States essentially exchanged a commercial conflict for a geopolitical stronghold, and the focal point has moved from the territories of Eastern Europe to the icy seas of the extreme north. To comprehend why this is significant, we must look beyond the courtesy and examine the detailed terms of what has genuinely been traded. On the exterior, it appears straightforward. Washington has consented to halt the threatened 25% duties on European industrial goods. In return, Europe, particularly through the structure of NATO and with the assistance of Denmark, has provided the United States exceptional expedited access to Greenland. But this is not concerning tourism, and it is definitely not just concerning scientific investigation. This is concerning two elements that characterize contemporary strength: vital minerals and tactical positioning. For years, the United States has been worried about its dependence on China for the uncommon earth components crucial for everything from combat aircraft navigation systems to electric automobile batteries. Greenland possesses one of the biggest unexploited reserves of these minerals on the planet. By obtaining this structure, President Trump has not just prevented a commercial conflict, he has obtained a direct procurement channel that circumvents Beijing completely. He has successfully incorporated Greenland's resource abundance into the American Manufacturing Foundation, considering the island's geology as a homeland security possession of the United States. This action clarifies the quietness we have observed from the White House concerning European commercial imbalances in the previous 48 hours. The influence of duties was probably never concerning the cost of steel or aluminum. It was the forcing instrument used to pry open the entrance to the Arctic. Secretary General Mark Rutte, a realist who recognizes that NATO cannot endure without complete American commitment, probably saw the indication clearly. He grasped that for the coalition to stay significant to an America First government, it had to present something concrete, something that directly benefited American strength. The Arctic structure is that contribution. It converts NATO from a protective coalition, concentrated on maintaining positions in Europe, into a resource obtaining aggressive force in the north. It is a deal pure and simple, and it mirrors the deal-making character of the present worldwide system. The Europeans received to maintain their trade markets accessible, saving their financial systems from downturn, but the cost they have surrendered is a forfeiture of tactical independence in their own territory. They have successfully delivered the access to the Arctic over to Washington. But why presently? Why is the Arctic abruptly the single most critical arena of activity? To respond to this, we must examine the chart through the perspective of military strategists in the Pentagon and the Kremlin. The Arctic is thawing, and as the ice withdraws, it is revealing new maritime passages and, more threateningly, new pathways of assault. Russia has invested the previous decade reinforcing its northern coastline, reopening Soviet-period installations, and evaluating hypersonic weapons that can cross the polar path to strike North American objectives in moments. The United States has felt vulnerable. The Arctic structure confronts this weakness directly. By obtaining broadened rights to construct and improve military facilities in Greenland, far beyond the current presence at Thule Air Base, the United States is arranging to establish a barrier against the Russian north. We are probably to witness the installation of sophisticated radar equipment, interceptor weapons, and possibly even the much-referenced Golden Dome missile protection design that has been a discussion point in defense communities. This is not just concerning monitoring the Russians. It is concerning obstructing them. There is another participant in this contest who is not at the negotiation, but whose existence is sensed in every provision of this arrangement: China. Beijing has labeled itself a near-Arctic nation and has been forcefully pursuing Greenland and other northern territories with capital hoping to establish a polar Silk Road. They desire the minerals and they desire the maritime passages. This American action is a direct counteraction to those goals. By bringing Greenland securely under the U.S. NATO security protection, Washington is lawfully and materially excluding China. The Arctic structure probably contains stipulations that examine foreign capital in vital facilities, a diplomatic method of stating no Chinese funding permitted. This is fiscal combat concealed as security partnership. The United States is informing the globe that if you desire to be part of the Western security design, you must sever your fiscal reliance on Chinese procurement networks. It is a severe warning, but in a globe of great power rivalry, neutrality is no longer a choice. We must also examine the domestic factors that resulted in this judgment. For President Trump, this is a substantial national achievement. He can address the American population and state that he didn't just approve a treaty. He purchased security and obtained the employment of the future by ensuring access to crucial resources. It confirms his aggressive approach to diplomacy, endanger the financial system to receive the security allowance. It also quiets opponents in the Pentagon who worried that his government might diminish NATO. Instead of diminishing it, he has redesigned it. He has required NATO to transform from a Cold War remnant into an instrument for contemporary resource rivalry. For the Europeans, the atmosphere is probably one of comfort combined with concern. They have evaded the fiscal damage of duties, which would have been disastrous for the German and French financial systems. But they have done so by recognizing that they are secondary associates in a US-directed grand approach. They have recognized that their security is completely reliant on American favor, and that favor arrives with a cost. The function of the intelligence organizations, the CIA, the NSA, and their European equivalents cannot be exaggerated here. For months, there have been discrete accounts of heightened Russian submarine movement in the North Atlantic, endangering the submerged cables that transport 90% of the globe's information. If those cables are severed, the worldwide financial system goes silent. The Arctic structure contains stipulations for improved maritime observation and intelligence distribution, particularly concentrated on these submerged dangers. This is the concealed conflict that is occurring beneath the surface. The new arrangement probably provides the US Navy and the NSA the permission to broaden their monitoring stations and detector grids throughout the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, the vital bottleneck that Russian submarines must traverse to arrive the Atlantic. By reinforcing their control on Greenland, the US is reinforcing the constraint around the Russian Northern Squadron. This is traditional containment approach, modernized for the 21st century. However, we must examine the dangers. This pact will unavoidably trigger a reaction from Moscow. The Kremlin regards the Arctic as its tactical refuge, the haven for its nuclear prevention. Observing the United States and NATO advance in such a synchronized, hostile fashion into what Russia regards its area of control will be perceived as an existential danger. We should anticipate to witness an escalation in Russian military maneuvers in the territory, possibly even hostile overflights or maritime confrontations. Vladimir Putin cannot manage to appear vulnerable in the north. He has invested much of his internal credibility on restoring Russian strength, and the Arctic is fundamental to that account. This arrangement advances the NATO-Russia confrontation boundary from the woodlands of Eastern Europe to the frozen seas of the polar region. The danger of an unintended collision, a crash between ice vessels and intercept gone incorrect, has just risen considerably. The globe is becoming more compact, and the major strengths are gathering into the same small frozen space. Furthermore, the ecological dimension of this pact is the unspoken issue that no one desires to address. Mining in Greenland is exceptionally disputed. The extraction of uncommon earth minerals is a contaminating, harmful procedure. By emphasizing tactical access, the US and NATO are successfully superseding regional and ecological worries in favor of homeland security. The account will be presented as sustainable energy sovereignty. We require these minerals for electric automobiles and wind generators to rescue the planet. But the truth on the territory will be industrial magnitude excavation in one of the globe's most delicate environments. This is the contradiction of contemporary strength. To rescue the climate, you must extract the earth. To obtain peace, you must arrange for conflict in the most unspoiled locations on the planet. The Arctic structure emphasizes the requirements of the military-industrial system over the conservation of the Arctic surroundings. A judgment that has been rendered in Washington and Brussels, probably with minimal contribution from the individuals who genuinely reside there. Let's halt to examine the fiscal consequences for the worldwide market. The dollar's supremacy is partially supported by the United States' capacity to regulate worldwide commerce movements and energy provisions. By obtaining a national or near-national origin of vital minerals, the U.S. is protecting itself from the kind of provision disruptions that have troubled the globe since the pandemic. If China chooses to prohibit uncommon earth shipments tomorrow, a danger they have issued before, the United States now has a contingency strategy. This reinforces the dollar and reinforces the U.S. capital climate. Investors dislike ambiguity, and this pact eliminates a substantial portion of ambiguity concerning the procurement network for high-tech sectors. We may witness a surge in U.S. defense securities, technology corporations, and mining enterprises involved in the territory. Conversely, Chinese enterprises that control the present uncommon earth market will perceive this as a long-term danger to their control. This is the commencement of the separation we have heard so much about, transitioning from discussion to actuality. We should also not dismiss the function of the United Kingdom in this configuration. While the UK is no longer in the EU, it stays a vital NATO axis. The GUK Greenland, Iceland, United Kingdom, is the maritime protective boundary of the Atlantic. The UK has probably been a discreet but engaged advocate of this structure, synchronizing with the US on the maritime dimensions. This reinforces the special connection and draws London nearer to Washington's tactical sphere, further separating it from European mainland politics. It confirms the concept of an Anglosphere of security, US, UK, Canada controlling the North Atlantic with the EU territories performing a supporting function. It establishes a layered NATO, the inner group that regulates the nuclear prevention and the high waters, and the outer group that supplies the installations and the support. What does this signify for the typical citizen or for territories in the worldwide South? It signifies that the period of worldwide free-for-all commerce is formally concluded. We are accessing a period of alliances. You are either in the American resource domain or the Chinese resource domain. Countries will be required to select where they receive their technology, their regulations, and their security. The Arctic structure is an indication that the United States is protecting the perimeter, obtaining its own boundary and its own procurement channels, and is prepared to utilize its fiscal influence duties to require its partners into alignment. It is a return to forceful strength. The diplomatic courtesies are finished. If you desire access to the American market, you must add to American security. It is a severe instruction for leaders around the globe. Independence is becoming a privilege that only the superpowers can manage. Smaller territories are becoming tactical property. As we examine ahead, we must inquire, is this maintainable? Can the United States successfully station the Arctic while addressing tensions in the Middle East and the Pacific? This Arctic structure commits the U.S. to a substantial expenditure of resources and attention. It demands ice vessels the U.S. presently doesn't possess in adequate quantities. It demands facilities that will require years to establish in severe conditions. It is a wager that the next confrontation will be determined by who regulates the movement of ions and electrons, not just petroleum and gas. It is a wager on technology, and it is a wager that Europe, anxious of Russian hostility and fiscal separation, will stay obedient. But political currents shift. A shift of administration in Denmark, or a rise in anti-American attitude in Europe, could complicate this structure. Yet, for now, the pact is finalized. The signature is permanent. In summary, the Arctic structure is the most considerable geopolitical advancement of the year because it redefines the parameters of the West. It is the instance the United States determined that the North is not just a boundary, but a combat zone. By exchanging duties for territory, or at least access to it, Donald Trump and Mark Rutte have recognized a harsh truth. The peace of the previous 30 years was an exception. We are returned to great power competition where every mountain chain, every island, and every maritime passage is a possible conflict zone. The duties were never the narrative. They were the instrument used to secure the actual objective. The United States has obtained its northern position and its technological future. And in doing so, it has transmitted a statement to Beijing and Moscow that it plans to remain the essential strength even at the summit of the globe. The Cold War has returned, and this time it is truly